be recorded and posted to the OWeb YouTube channel, so it can be referenced there. We'll also have the slide deck available for folks if you're interested in that, so just be aware of that. But welcome, good morning to the Forest Collaborative grant offering webinar, informational webinar. Let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint presentation and just bear with me as I do that. Let's see. Okay. Are you, Heidi, Eric, are we seeing the presentation slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. So welcome everyone again. My name is Kyle Sullivan Astor. I work for the Department of Forestry as the Federal Forest Restoration Program lead. I'm joined here by two colleagues, Eric and Heidi, and I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Heidi Hartman. I work at OWeb. I'm the federal program specialist, and I will be the OWeb administrative contact for the Forest Collaborative grant offering. Welcome, everyone.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Hartstein. I am the Senior Policy Coordinator at OWeb, and I help out with the Forest Collaborative grant program here at the agency, and glad to see some familiar names here at this webinar.
Great. Let's go ahead and get started. So I think it would, just before we dive into providing a little bit more information about this grant offering, I think it would be helpful to provide a little bit of context for the grant offering for the Federal Forest Restoration Program with which the grant offering sits. And then just, the Department of Forestry and I guess OWeb's, mission more broadly. But so this is, of course, Oregon, the state of Oregon, and half the land cover of our state is forested. So all the forests of the state are represented here. And the dark green shows the amount of that forest that is federally managed. So 60% or over 17 million acres of all of our forests in the state are managed by federal agencies, which really just sort of underscores or illustrates the role that those federal forests play with the overall health of our forests within the state, but also the Department of Forestry's ability to fulfill its mission to protect and promote resilient forests across the state. So federal forests play a pretty significant role in the overall forest makeup within Oregon. This is just by way of, again, context for the Federal Forest Restoration Program, just to give a little bit of background. Really, this work started in 2009 with the Board of Forestry issuing a report that related to federal forest lands and sort of laying out a vision for how those federal forest lands can contribute to sustainability within Oregon. That report came up with some recommendations, one of which was to create a federal forest liaison program that sits within state government. And 4 years later, in 2013, that program was approved by the state legislature for the 2013-15 biennium. And the program, along with this grant offering, was initiated in that biennium. So this grant offering's been around since the inception of the program. A year later, 2014, Congress passes the Good Neighbor Authority. That's really just important just to because it is a mechanism by which states can actively partner with federal agencies to steward these federal forests. In 2016, that work was actually officially kicked off in Oregon with the signing of our Master Good Neighbor Authority Agreement with the Forest Service. And then in 2018, House Bill 4118 passed, which the importance of that really is just that law that eventually became ORS 526275 really established the state's policy with regard to good neighbor authority and how we approach federal forest work. So just high level policy stated in statute or codified in statute 2018. And then the next three are really, they're related. They're not, perfectly related necessarily to the FFR program, but they're certainly related to wildfire risk reduction, which is a main thrust of the program's work. 2019, of course, the governor, many folks will know that the governor convened a council on wildfire response, which laid out a lot of recommendations for change within our state government system. And in 2021, a good chunk of those recommendations were codified in Senate Bill 762. That, of course, was a pretty wide sweeping wildfire omnibus bill, a lot of different aspects. The way it affected the federal forest restoration program at ODF was the addition of some more staffing capacity. So it expanded our programming a little bit out of 2021. And then most recently in 2023, we ODF, along with our sister state and federal agencies, put forward a landscape resilience strategy, a 20-year landscape resilience strategy, which really today continues to guide the work of the FFR program at a more tactical level. But the overall mission and guiding legislation of the program, our core mission, and this has been in place since the program's inception in 2013, is to accelerate the pay, scale, and quality of forest restoration to increase the resilience of Oregon's federal forests. And then, of course, we have state statute that I mentioned, 526275. It is a policy of the state to pursue projects under the Good Neighbor Authority that increase timber harvest volume, contribute to job creation, reduce wildfire risk to all lands, improve wildlife habitat and watershed health, and stimulate local economies. And so these sort of two things represent really the highest level of direction for the federal forest restoration program, and by extension, this grant offering, because this offering is a part of the program. So how do we achieve that mission? The FFR program is more than simply, a good neighbor authority program that exists in a lot of other Western states. It's really a comprehensive approach to conducting restoration work on federal lands, which we've sort of modeled after this adaptive management framework, particularly our monitoring component. But 4 components, collaborative support being the first one. And of course, that's where this grant program or this grant offering comes in. We also have a technical assistance and science support grant offering that will be live for the current biennium. We're not going to be detailing it here, but those 2 grant programs coupled together really encompass the collaborative support component of the program. We also heavily invest and provide staff to do planning and project preparation work. This is a big bottleneck in a lot of our federal forests, for our federal forest managers. And so we've invested in basically the planning and compliance work necessary to get restoration treatments done. We, of course, contribute to implementation of those restoration treatments. This is the thinning, both commercial and non-commercial vegetation management treatments, prescribed fire, but also habitat improvement, watershed, and aquatic restoration projects. The full gamut of restoration, quote unquote, restoration projects occurring on federal lands is what we contribute to, both our staff time, but also our investments. And then monitoring, which is sort of unique for this program, but we do view it as important to invest in that work that looks basically back at, hey, did we achieve what we intend to achieve with our work, with the work that we set out to do within the program's work, but the federal forests work more broadly. So that's another important component of the program. This grant offering, the goal of which is to increase the number, acreage, and complexity of collaboratively planned projects in Oregon. And to do so, we really support both the establishment of governance for forest collaboratives, or reestablishment of that governance through an operating manual of some kind, a charter, some sort of governing document that sort of sets the rules of the road for a forest collaborative and collaborators that are participating in those groups to essentially have the framework to enter into dialogue on federal forests management and specific projects, if that's what the group is focused on. And then, of course, looking to advance, once that group has some sort of guidance or a governing document, advancing zones of agreement that these multi-stakeholders can sort of coalesce around to provide recommendations fundamentally to the federal forest managers so that they can issue projects that sort of align with the broad suite of values represented at those forest collaboratives, and ultimately avoid conflict, avoid litigation, avoid efforts to stop those projects, and that's the emphasis of the program. And the other emphasis is really focused on vegetation management projects. That's the core thrust of what we're trying to achieve when we say increasing the pay, scale, and quality and forest resilience. We're looking at projects that manipulate vegetation in some way, and often in the previous decades, that's been where the contention is, and so that's where this grant program and the program overall is focused, is essentially projects that manipulate vegetation in some way. And then, of course, we obviously administer this grant program. ODF does, in partnership with the Watershed Enhancement Board, and it's a great partnership. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Heidi to talk about the grant program timeline and the budget for this offering.
Thanks, Kyle. So as you can see, we have $350,000 available this biennium for the Forest Collaborative grant offering. And we have that kind of separated out into different activity types. So we are offering up to $20,000 for collaborative governance proposals, and zones of agreement proposals may request up to $65,000. You can apply for both activity types and request up to $85,000. And this is all outlined in the program guidance document that is on the Forest Collaborative's website on OWEB's webpage. So I encourage you to take a look at that document if you haven't already. And then just quickly, we opened the grant offering on the 26th of August. We're here at the webinar today. It is recorded. It will be uploaded to OWEB's YouTube channel, so you can go back and revisit it if you have any questions or know someone that might have missed it. Our applications are due at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the 23rd of October. We do recommend or encourage applicants to try to get their applications in at least 24 hours in advance. That's not a requirement, but if there are any glitches in the system or anything, it gives us some time to try to help you figure that out. And applications are due by 5 p.m. on the 23rd, and there's no exceptions to that deadline. So after the applications are received, we'll go through an eligibility review, and we have a review team that is set up and ready to start reviewing applications, and we will meet on the 21st of November to review the applications with the technical review team, and they will make some basically they will review the applications and vote, and we'll see how much money we have left, or if we have any money left, or if we have to draw a funding line. So that will all kind of play out at the review team meeting on the 21st. And these are board awarded grants, so they will go in front of OWEB's board at the January board meeting, which is the 27th and 28th. and they will make their funding decision on that date. And it also will provide an opportunity for anyone to provide public comment at the board meeting. And then our goal is to have the grant agreements finalized no later than March of 26. Yeah, and if you have any questions about, administrative questions about the application, I would be the person to contact. If you have questions about eligibility or want to request a pre-application consultation, Kyle would be the point person there. And also just wanted to encourage folks, if you think of questions as we're going through the PowerPoint today or the presentation today, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can type in those questions. We'll be monitoring those. And then at the end of the presentation today, we'll try to answer all of those questions.
Great, thanks, Heidi. And I just want to point out that this offering being a board decision, OWEB board decision, is a new thing. Simply from previous iterations of this, it does allow for an opportunity for public comment, like Heidi mentioned. So just wanted to point that out. And ultimately, the review team is making a recommendation to staff, OWEB staff, but also ultimately the board, the Watershed Enhancement Board is making the final call with regard to investments for this grant offering. And we'll revisit, and thank you. Yes, please be entering your questions as they come, as you have them in the Q&A function, and we'll get to those at the end of this. And we'll revisit this timeline too at the end. So the next slide was just again, by way of context, providing a little bit of background for this grant offering and showing, hey, what were the investment amounts from each iteration of the grant offering, going from where it started in 2013 through the current amount, the current biennium, and just showing trends over time. Basically, $500,000 was allocated to the agency for this grant program every biennium since 2013. However, the varying amounts are just showing actual awarded amounts within that biennium. So sometimes that awarded amount changed. It obviously fluctuated over time based on what awards were made in that biennium. So just showing the trends. And then, of course, the exception with that is the current biennium, which is just showing the budgeted amount of $350,000. We obviously haven't made awards yet. But it is worth pointing out that this grant offering was not made a part of the governor's budget, and it was not given to the agency by the legislature in its budget bill. And so this offering was essentially a one-time repurposing of existing FFR program funds at ODF to ensure that at least that this grant offering is continued for the current biennium. And there's not any certainty that this model will be able to be continued without those legislative investments, but the agency made the decision to continue this grant offering with some repurposing of program funds from other components of the program. And so that amount for the current biennium was $250,000 of new investments. There was a $121,000 balance from the previous offering of this grant offering last biennium. And then when one subtracts the $21,000 of OWEB administration fees for this grant offering, that's where we get the $350,000 budget for this offering. So this is just showing, hey, the total investments in supporting forest collaboratives through the FFR program. That is inclusive of what we call TAS, technical assistance and science support grants. But from inception through the end of the current biennium, so $5.8 million invested in supporting collaboratives over that period, and $39 million of state funds invested in the program overall over that period. And I don't know that need to make this the case to this group, but just wanted to point out that, hey, that, you know, those general fund investments are not only supporting the forest collaboratives and important in that regard, but for supporting those permitting and compliance and planning efforts through the program. ODF staff focused on this work and program monitoring. And so basically areas that have very little federal funds or no federal funds at all is where these general funds, these state general funds are really important. And not only leveraging federal funds, but just making investments in areas that, hey, they just have no federal funds. So let's go to the next one. So we're not gonna detail every aspect of this grant offering with the webinar. We again would encourage you to look at the guidance document on the webpage. We did want to point out though some sort of changes that happen that are part of this now for the current biennium as compared to last biennium. The first one of which is previous iterations, we had a $1 match requirement. Basically, OWEB's statutory requirements, further research on those requirements has they made the determination that 5% match is more in line with those requirements, and so there will be a 5% match component as part of the grant application for this offering for the current biennium. So that's a change. We have an additional question in the application related to basically just trying to suss out similar investments that are happening within the collaborative's geography or in the collaborative itself, just to provide the review team with a little bit more context with different investments that are happening for perhaps similar work or related work, just to paint a more comprehensive picture. So there's an additional question in the application related to that. There's also an additional, I believe, question and an evaluation criteria related to climate change. And this has been added to all of OWEB's grant offerings. And so this is simply, falling in line with all other OWEB offerings and adding that question and criteria for selection. In the zones of agreement applications, we are requesting additional discussion of existing or potential areas of disagreement on behalf of the applicant and strategies that the applicant has to resolve that disagreement. So really targeting sort of the core of what we're intending to essentially support with this grant offering, which is, hey, where are the folks engaging at the Forest Collaborative, where are they disagreeing? And what strategies do you have, applicant, to sort of create the conditions for that group to work through those areas of disagreement, and ideally, reach some sort of consensus or approach, sort of resolving those areas of disagreement or reaching some compromise that is core to these agreement-seeking forest collaboratives, and so we just wanted to really target that in the application itself. The last thing is that there are certain required uploads this biennium. I think previous offerings there weren't any technically required uploads, and we're going to talk about those on the next slide. But basically, just by way of, again, creating more information, more context for the review team to make their evaluation decisions, including things like the operating manual or your charter, and the letters of support from the agency to prove engagement, those types of things. There will be required documents that are required as part of the application for this go around, and we're going to talk about those right now. Heidi's going to talk about those right now. So,
so as you can see, we have a list of required uploads for this grant offering. Definitely want to see at least one color map showing the watershed context and proximity to the nearest city or town. We also want, like Kyle was talking about, some sort of formal organizational structure. Some examples of that documentation would be like a list of collaborative memberships, leadership structure, decision-making processes, and any group bylaws that are in place. Could also be a statement of commitment or a memorandum of understanding signed by the collaborative members, or a stated mission or shared purpose for the collaborative group. So it'd be a combination of any of those or all of those. If you have questions on, what exactly we're looking for, I would reach out to Kyle. We also want proof of engagement with either the Forest Service or BLM. That could include NEPA scoping comment letters, an MOU, or some other agreement with the federal agency, or written letters or correspondence with the federal agency showing that engagement is already in place. If you have an existing collaborative, we would like to see meeting minutes from the previous 3 meetings as an upload, and any letters of support from Forest Service or BLM for the collaborative work. And just wanted to make a note, we understand that some of the forest collaboratives applying for the collaborative governance project type may not have all of the required attachments or uploads. If you have questions on that, reach out to Kyle, but do attach whatever documentation that your collaborative has currently. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. And then we have some optional uploads. The federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, if you have one in place. If you have secured match, you can upload that with your application, and then any other uploads that may support your project. And that would include letters of support, or anything that you think is pertinent. We do ask that, try to limit the other uploads. We have a 32 megabyte limitation on uploads that we can receive. So try to, think about what actually would be pertinent to the review when you're considering those other uploads.
Great, thanks, Heidi. And we're going to kick it over to Eric to talk about the evaluation criteria for this offering.
Great, thanks, Kyle. And yes, so these are the criteria upon which the applications will be evaluated on. These are according to Oregon administrative rule. So we have a couple listed here. The first one, the 695005, that is the climate related evaluation criteria that Kyle mentioned a moment ago. And the second number there is the 695030 is the evaluation criteria that is applicable to OWEB's technical assistance grant program. So I won't go through all of these in detail, but you'll see here that we have several criteria that are related to the proposal clarity, 3 that are related to technical soundness, including one that is relevant to the climate related evaluation criteria. We have organizational capacity, and here's where we also have a supplemental criterion so that it's most applicable to the Forest Collaborative Technical Assistance Grant Program. So the supplemental criterion is the collaborative composed of balanced and diverse interested parties necessary to develop agreement. And then finally, we have engagement, which also has a second supplemental criterion, which is has the collaborative demonstrated engagement of the collaborative group with a federal agency, the BLM or the Forest Service. And these are, before we go to the next slide, these are also in the guidance document that's been referred to a few times. That's up on OWEB's website, if there's any questions.
Great, thanks, Eric. and that's the place to reference this. And this it goes without saying, but this will be the criteria that the review team uses, right, to make their recommendations for funding for the applications. And so we'll end here with the grant timeline, and of course the budget for the offering, just so that you have another view of that. This, of course, is a part of the guidance document. So if you really need to reference back to, hey, when are applications due? They're due, I think, 5 weeks from now on October 23rd. We're, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks into this solicitation. So you got some time. And if you're curious about subsequent steps, reference that guidance document as far as timeline for the offering. So hopefully some of that spurred some questions. I think that's the primary goal of this webinar, is really just provide an opportunity to answer any questions that you all have at this stage. And then, yeah, just offering up some if you have questions offline, definitely I'm available. I think Heidi is available for talking about, certain aspects of this offering. And so if you think of something later, feel free to reach out, but now is the time to knock any of those down that you have right now. So with that,
okay, Kyle, before you move on from this slide, just one maybe clarification here. It's probably obvious to everybody, but following the review team meeting on November 21st, OWEB will be developing written evaluations that will be provided to the applicants in advance of the January board meeting. So that is something that you'll have in advance of the board meeting. You can see that, and if you'd like to provide comment to the board for that meeting, you'll have that document in place.
Great. That's really good to know. Okay. All right. Well, happy to go back to reference any slide that for folks who have questions, but why don't we see if you have any questions here.
In the chat, there's a question from Terry Fairbanks, and they would like to know, can you be more clear on proof of engagement with BLM and U.S. Forest Service?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question, Terry. I think the intention there, just so you understand, is really that, hey, fundamentally, when we talk about agreement-seeking forest collaboratives engaging in federal forest management and policy, and just providing and weighing in, I think engagement at any level with the actual federal forest managers, not that that's not occurring in most cases, but in some cases, that it's not clear exactly how or if at all recently that the forest collaborative is in dialogue or engaging with the forest with the Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management. So that will take the form of, and I think we provided some examples on well, I guess we didn't, but I'm going to talk about those now. NEPA comment letters, some sort of MOU, sort of, memorandum or some letter from between the Forest Collaborative and the federal agency to sort of monument that the fact that the collaborative is engaging with the Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management. That's the intention there, is that there's, so often forest collaborators, hey, they're issuing letters documenting zones of agreement to forest supervisors or to regional foresters to say, hey, here on this project or on this, set of treatments for more programmatic approaches, we a collaborative agree on these 5 general principles. So hopefully that helps. again, this is required because it is so fundamental to agreement seeking around vegetation management on federal forest projects. So Terry, speak up if I didn't get you answer your question. But hopefully that helps. We got
Okay,
another-
there's a question from Nathan. Then I'll just read it to the group. So it says, I'm looking at establishing a new forest collaborative rather than adding capacity to an existing one. Would this funding support the creation of a collaborative that doesn't have a charter, meeting minutes, or current engagement with agencies?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the short answer is yes. I think that the intention of this grant program is not simply to just support existing groups that have already been stood up. I mean, one example of this in the past that this program or this offering is supported is the creation of the Oregon Central Coast Forest Collaborative, engaging primarily with the Siuslaw National Forest. So that's where this collaborative governance project type comes into play, really starting to establish that charter, establish some operating manual or some general stated purpose and documentation. And and there's plenty of examples of this at this point, right? I mean, we have pretty long-standing forest collaboratives that have been around much longer than even this grant offering or the Federal Forest Restoration Program, Blue Mountains Forest Partners. We have great examples of operating manuals or charters out there. And so, yes, having a group sort of make the case to apply for funding to establish that charter is definitely an eligible activity as part of this offering.
Thanks, Kyle. We have another question. For ZOA proposals, can you speak to the value of keeping a proposal hyper-focused on a particular project compared with incorporating many aspects of our collaborative's work? For example, in addition to developing zones of agreement on a particular issue, is it also advantageous to speak about our outreach or social license development, as well as prescriptive fire and smoke management work?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the short answer is yes. I think those things are relevant. And by the way, on its face, perhaps not specifically related to development of zones of agreement. However, I think one can make the case that some of those elements, particularly public outreach, are a part of developing a zone of agreement, maybe not necessarily for the collaborative itself, but for the public more broadly. So I think the short answer, Jacob, is yes. And I think, keeping in mind, again, the purpose of the offering, the evaluation criteria with which the offering is, or the proposal is evaluated against, and then emphasizing, the aspects of what the collaborative is working on that relate to the purpose and that evaluation criteria. That's going to be your best bet. And so again, I just say that, the outreach work that a collaborative is doing is definitely worth mentioning, but perhaps not spending an abundance of time on necessarily, because it may be related or drawing the connection. Like I said, there could be a connection between that outreach work and the zones of agreement development, but maybe spending less time there than you would for the project specific work. So hopefully that helps.
Any other questions from the group?
These are good questions.
Not seeing any coming in.
All right. Well, like I said, I'm available for follow-up questions particularly during this solicitation period. We'll make available this slide deck if folks want to reference that for whatever they found useful there. We'll make that available, and then of course this recording will OEB is going to make available as well. And it doesn't look like you have any more questions right now, and that's fine. So thanks all for tuning in, and hopefully you have a little bit of better sense of this offering and sort of what we're looking for applications. So don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I think we can close this down. So